Okay, joining us for this segment is Brandon Faust, Mold Zero. He's been on the show a couple of times, does a great job of explaining this. This is an area where I had a blind spot on this. I didn't understand, I understand humidity. We live in Florida. It's hot. It's wet all the time. I didn't think of mold. I mean, I knew what mold was, but I didn't think of it as affecting my health, or certainly not something that could damage my property, do real damage to the value of my home. But I was wrong. It turns out Brandon has lots of stories about folks that had issues with mold and didn't even know about it. And before we get started, Brandon, I want to thank you for coming in. I always think of mildew as nothing harmful at all. It's just something that you can wipe off with a rag or towel. You've kind of educated me about what mildew is. Just tell folks out there what mildew is.
Yeah, I mean, mildew is really a euphemism for mold.
Okay.
Right? Now, that's not to say that you don't have some growth that could wind up like on a biofilm in your shower, right, that looks like mold. But usually if you're seeing some sort of growth, we're past the point you want to be. It means that there's airborne spores that is now starting to manifest on some sort of surface. The biggest concern I would have as a parent or as somebody that has had my own health impacts related to mold is how high is the spore count in the actual building envelope.
Every time you come in here, I learn something else. As you can see, this is an area that a lot of technical expertise is required. I always think of it as, there it is, and I'm wiped it away. The idea that it's in the air and it's particulate matter that I'm breathing in, that makes it all more real for me, because now I realize how it's getting inside me and how easily it can get inside me.
100%. So I was actually at a home yesterday, and the lady had been going to a functional medicine doctor. The doctor had found mold in her bloodstream and said, look, you really need to get this checked out. Call Mold Zero. And we went in there, and right out the gate, I look over to her vents, and within 30 seconds, I'm seeing the issue. And she's going on a whole long sort of explanation that she doesn't see any mold in the house. She doesn't see why the doctor would have referred us, but he did. So please take a look and see what you can find. So I went in there, looked at the actual vents themselves, looked into the actual ducts and the boot of the duct, and there basically was growth all throughout the boot and actually on the vents themselves.
And like you said, once we're at that point...
Yeah, if you're there, that's the last place you're going to see it. So you definitely have it at that point in the actual system. So you could go, well, let's get the ducts cleaned. And believe it or not, her mom had actually just done that same process where she had a growth, and somebody had come in and said, look, you need to get your entire ducts replaced, because they tried to clean the ducts using the brush system, and it shredded her ducts. So then they had to pay a huge amount of money for the ducts to be fully replaced. So... not to say that the duct shouldn't have been replaced, because, if you try to clean it and it damages it, you don't really have an option.
Right.
But there may have been a step that you could have taken before going there, which is doing a whole home sanitization and sanitizing the ducts and killing what's inside of it. Because as soon as you're going to go in there with these brushes, you are going to agitate what's in there, and it is going to go around the rest of the house.
You guys have that dry fog?
That's exactly right. So we have a particular technology that we use. It is a dry fog, and what that means is that the size of the particulate that we're putting out there is under 10 microns. Now, to kind of not talk nerdy, but just to put it in perspective, you can fit 10 mold spores on the tip of a hair. So
tiny.
Very tiny, and this is even tinier than that. So
Gotcha.
The size of the droplets that we're creating are actually 1/3 the size of a mold spore.
Amazing.
So literally you could fit 30 of them on the tip of a hair. So it just bounces around until it evaporates, right? Because it doesn't splatter. It's too tiny for it to actually splatter. So it doesn't leave any sort of residue or wetness. Electronics can stay in the home. Your furniture all stays in the home. So it's safe, and it's also non-toxic. It's hydrogen peroxide and a commercial grade vinegar. So you can actually be back in the home 3 hours after we've done the fogging. Now, with that said, that's a treatment that we do with every home that we end up basically treating or handling. Right. But in some cases, you're going to need to do the actual traditional remediation, which we also do, where we would remove the contaminated material. So there are certain myths in regards to mold that we could also talk about if you want. But in regards to like the wet molds or the more toxic molds that actually come from a water intrusion event, those are not the types of molds that we're going to use the fogging only as a solution. Yes, we will use it at the tail end once we've done the containment and we've done the vacuuming and we've done the wipe down and we've done all of that type of stuff. Yes, we'll do the traditional remediation, but then we'll come in to make sure that the entire building envelope is safe. because the spores don't just stay in one spot. That's just like kind of a bit of maybe a hope or a desire, but it's just not an isness. It's not a truth.
So a lot of folks think they understand mold because they understand one type, but there's so many different types.
That's true. That's absolutely correct. So, you have the toxic type in black mold, which everybody's heard about.
Yeah, sure. That's the one people always think, oh, no.
Black mold, right? Stachybotrys. But that is one type of toxic mold. And there's actually, a number of different types. And even one of them that you would consider to be a pathogenic mold, which you hear about as well, which is Aspergillus, and it usually goes in the same sentence as Aspergillus penicillium. Well, that particular mold, it's a white mold most of the time, and they can have different colors, but that mold puts out 5 different mycotoxins, Aspergillus in particular, which is extremely devastating for some people, And then penicillin or penicillium, that's where penicillin actually derives from, that antibiotic, right? So, and of course, it's fighting a living organism. Well, some people are allergic to that, and it can cause a serious problem for them. Same type of thing. They get into a home where there's high Aspergillus penicillium, and they're having hives, they're having a reaction of magnitude. So, and then the next level, which is honestly the least concerning of all, is a allergenic mold. But that's the one that you see in the vents. That's the one that you see in the ducts all the time in Florida, just due to the nature of the environment we're living in. Spores come in, they get past the actual filter, the coils get wet, and you have AC companies that sell, whole home purifying devices, which is fine. It's better than nothing. But at the same time, you can put one of those purifying devices in, let's say, a garbage dump, and it's not going to bring down the levels, right? You need to reset the house. Then you put in the purifying device, and it helps to extend the length of that great indoor air quality.
Well, I tell you, just listening to you talk, you can tell how extensive your knowledge is on this subject. Another thing that occurs to me is the variety of symptoms that folks would experience as a result of exposure is going to vary because there's so many types of mold. So say I have someone, I don't feel particularly well, and a friend who has had a mold experience said, hey, it could be mold, but I had headaches and I didn't have respiratory. Well, that can't be. Well, there's so many different kinds of mold that your response can be different. And if one person can result in lung irritation, one person has eye problems, because they're just different molds.
Absolutely, and it's also different immune systems. Okay. So whatever part of that body that's having a weakness or is potentially being overworked, whatever it may be, that might be the area that their body starts reacting. Because the body is going to release histamines in order to combat the foreign invader. So you really have 2 different factors. One is the spore kind of entering the body, and the other factor is the mycotoxin, which not all molds release a mycotoxin. Many of them do. And myco means fungus, and toxin is a poisonous substance, right? So it releases actually a poisonous gas. So those are 2 things that you have to be concerned about. Now, for example, in this home that I was at yesterday, she had an allergenic mold, but her daughter had a chronic cough, runny nose, bloody noses, all kinds of stuff. And then you see it in the ducts, and it's no wonder whatsoever, right? Same thing with her. So they were having different reactions, but both of them were reacting to that allergenic mold that was in their ducts and in their AC system.
So I can see you're coming into it like a detective, trying to gather clues and figure out what the symptoms are and what you can see and not see and what you feel. And then, of course, we talked about the home, potential humidity or moisture intrusions into the home. So it's quite a bit of detective work you have to do to figure out which harmful bacteria, which harmful mold is present, then what's the best method for treating this situation, and then how to develop a responsibility among the customer there that, hey, your health is being impacted here. You need to understand that if you start experiencing this irritation of your throat, eyes, nose, whatever it might be, this is a possibility here that you need to investigate.
Yeah, I actually had a lady that had come to work with us, and she was reading through our literature, and red flags were going off, for her, and she was like, "Look, I need you to come inspect my home."
Right.
So of course, I did, and then she had a water intrusion issue where the soap dish was detached from the actual shower wall for a long time, and the water was getting in behind the wall, and then into her master bedroom, on her tack strips, and then into her carpet. So I went in there and started investigating, found out that her husband also had an issue with his leg having been swelling up and asthma-type symptoms and all kinds of physical issues. Wow. So we got in there, started cutting out the carpet, removed the tack strips, and then we looked behind the wall, Sure enough, there's also the toxic mold. So she had a number of different molds that were, present right near her master bedroom. And her son, who was, 2 years old, was also having physical issues, and his room is right across the way, So we should be getting the results back on her home today. And as soon as, if it's at normal levels or safe levels, they'll move back in. And if not, we're going to go back in and retreat it. And that's part of what we offer is a 1-year warranty and also a clean bill of health guarantee for our clients. So those samples have to come back at a safe level for us to walk away from a job after we've completed, to walk away having completed the job.
Brandon Faust, Mold Zero. That is so awesome. You can hear the amount of knowledge the gentleman has in this subject and how woefully uneducated most consumers are out there when it comes to mold, the varieties, and all the symptoms that you can experience. We're going to come into a break now. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the mythology around mold. A lot of people think they understand it or they actually have no idea what it is. Brandon's going to help us understand exactly what the dangers are to you and how you can combat this silent killer. Mold is everywhere in Florida, so don't go anywhere. Check us out online. Again, this is the Consumer Quarterback Show. We're here for you. Brandon Rhymes created this great show for us. We're going to do a feel-good story when we come back, and we're going to visit with Brandon Faust, Mold Zero. He's got some real information for you.
Hey, this is Grant Cardone, and you're listening to Consumer Quarterback Show, hosted by my friend Brandon Rhymes. Do not touch that dial. I'll come right through the radio and grab your throat.